Okay, we will go ahead and start. Thank you all of you, for attending this panel today on the USDOT programs, and then office hours will be following. First, my name is Layla Kral. I'm the administrator of the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council. It's an agency unique to Idaho. We were created by our state legislature to provide technical assistance to local units of government within the state on their transportation-related projects. Over the course of our history, we've taken on most of the federal aid administration on local projects in the state through a stewardship agreement with our transportation department. So a little unique and a little bit about me and what we do. I will then ask all the panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with you.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Name is Dr. Santiago Cruz Ropeda with FRA. You can just call me Santi. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Carl Ringgold from the Build America Bureau, USDOT.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Williams. I'm with the Build America Bureau. I'm a project development lead focused on our transit and TOD portfolios.
Hi there, I'm Cecilia Rotola. I'm a project and outreach lead for the Thriving Communities program with the Build America Bureau, OST.
Okay, first up, we'll have Carl and Sarah talk to us about the Build America Bureau.
All right. So I'm going to look at you all since it's like no one here. All right. I think we just need the slides to start transitioning. Oh, that's how we do it. All right, great. So really quickly, a little background on our office, the Build America Bureau. Office was stood up around 2015, sort of at the tail end of the Obama administration. And initially, our office was sort of created to house all of the department's finance programs. So historically, RIF was administered by our friends at FRA, TIFIA administered by FHWA, and the idea was sort of to bring those programs under one umbrella. So that's our financial assistance, and you can read some of the other things, and I'll get into some more detail later. Our technical assistance programs, and there are now 2, 4, at least 6 that I can think of off the top of my head. Our technical assistance programs are new grant and technical assistance programs that have sort of come under our purview in the last 2 years. So just a little org chart of sorts. The Build America Bureau, we're in the office of the Secretary, particularly the office of the Undersecretary of Transportation Policy. We do 3 things: outreach and project development, our credit programs, as well as now technical assistance. Really 4 things. There's portfolio management as well. That sort of falls under the credit programs. We work directly with all of the relevant modes, and you can see them there. FHWA, FTA, FRA, FAA, and MARAD. And what we rely on the modes for more than anything is sort of paths to eligibility. You know, the Bureau, we do not declare a project eligible. We sort of look at whatever modal administration we have to work with, and whatever their rules are the rules that we follow. And more importantly, oversight. We work directly with the modes as it relates to oversight of the projects as well. Sarah and I are going to kind of tag team this one. Our PABS program is really no different than seeking bonding at market. That's the easiest way to describe it. But again, our 2 big programs, TIFIA and RIF, some of this information you see here is really what has changed to TIFIA since the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think what I will cover that I think is most important, when you look at the cost parameters, there is a floor of $10 million to seek TIFIA loans. TIFIA does sort of influence total federal assistance, so there's an 80% cap in terms of total federal assistance. One thing that I think is really cool that is a result of the IIJA and BIL, while you could ask for 49%, historically TIFIA would only loan up to 33%. That's kind of changed where sponsors now, it's accepted that you could ask for up to 49%. More importantly though, TIFIA can now be used for local match. So, you know, you couldn't do that before when you were seeking a grant or, you know, some other sort of funding. TIFIA couldn't be used for local match, but now it can. And this money is appropriated by Congress. It's currently $100 billion in the TIFIA fund. So no sort of, everything's on a rolling basis. I'll let you go now.
Thanks, and then I'll expand a little bit more on RIF and also touch on TIFIA some as well. So TIFIA is more surface transportation focused, so it's traditionally funded highways, bridges, bike ped infrastructure. RIF is more railroad focused, so we can do intercity passenger rail, freight rail, so it's really railroad focused. There's no minimum project cost and no maximum loan value under RIF, unlike TIFIA. I will say that one thing about TIFIA is that the government subsidizes the credit risk, so sponsors are required to provide an investment grade rating from a nationally recognized agency under TIFIA. That is not the case with RIF. However, a lot of sponsors for RIF loans will provide some sort of rating to help calculate a credit risk premium or CRP that the borrower would have to pay, but it would get repaid with interest once the loan is repaid. As I mentioned, I focus on our TOD portfolio, so TOD is a newer program for us, and there are paths to eligibility under both TIFIA and RIF. They're a little bit different. Under TIFIA, we can fund what qualifies as public infrastructure around eligible facilities, and for RIF, we can fund what projects that promote economic development around qualifying facilities, and I'll get into the differentiations between those two in subsequent slides.
So really quickly, to talk about some of the features of the credit programs, and again, these are sort of changes as a result of the IIJA. Your loan repayment terms can go as long as 75 years. There's a 5-year deferral. Everything is sort of customizable. You know, we work on a case-by-case basis depending on the project. Interest is only accrued to funds as those funds are drawn down. So if you take a $50 million loan, you know, you would only accrue interest as you draw money down. There's no penalty for prepayment. And again, it can be included as local match. And this interest rate is actually a little different as of today. I think it's somewhere around 3.86%. You showed me earlier? Yeah. So, you know, low interest rate depending on where Treasury is that day.
So this is our Rural Project Initiative, or RPI. This is part of our TIFIA program. It's really designed to assist projects in more rural areas. The DOT defines rural as located outside of a census-defined urbanized area with a population greater than 150,000. So I got this nice little map. So outside of Boise, I think there could be a lot of potential for projects if they're outside the Boise area. There are a number of there are some parameters and there are some benefits. The biggest benefit is that we offer actually half the U.S. Treasury rate for RPI projects. So as of now, based on the rate we showed on the previous slide, it could be about 2% for a loan, for a 30-year loan, if it qualifies for RPI. We can finance up to 49% of costs for RPI, and there are borrower advisor fees that are associated with anybody who tries to get a loan through our program, and RPI can help assist with those borrower fees. I will say that the project cost does have to be below $100 million in order to be eligible, though.
So really quickly, I just want to highlight some eligible projects, eligible borrowers for TIFIA. Sarah kind of touched on this, but again, if it's surface transportation, it more than likely is eligible for TIFIA. And in terms of the type of borrowers, TIFIA does allow sort of private entities in addition to public entities to borrow, so long as it is a eligible project. So I won't read all that to you. You can see it there, but TIFIA is pretty open-ended in terms of the type of projects and the type of borrowers who can pursue it.
And then I'll touch on RIF. Again, RIF is more railroad focused, so we can do freight rail, intercity passenger rail, as I mentioned. We can do seaports that are serviced by railroad as well. We're definitely expanding that portfolio. In terms of eligible borrowers, railroads, government entities, and then I'll touch on TOD because it's eligible under both TIFIA and RIF. So under TIFIA, again, it would have to be qualify as public infrastructure. Under TIFIA, in terms of eligible borrowers for TOD, we have a lot of private developers that approach us. Private developers under TIFIA can be eligible borrowers, but they're required to have public sponsorship. So basically another eligible borrower here, like a government entity, a transit agency, would have to be involved with the project. And they would need to make sure that project is programmed into a TIP and or STIP. The public entity would not need to actually be on the loan itself, but they would just need to make sure they're providing oversight and make sure it's programmed into that TIP and STIP. With respect to RIF, for TOD, again, we can do economic development type projects. Again, developers or a private entity can be an eligible borrower under RIF. However, they would need to be in a joint venture with one of the other eligible borrowers listed here, so a railroad or a government entity. When we say JV, we like to say lowercase JV, so basically there needs to be an agreement in place, like an MOU, an MOA, or something that clearly lays out the roles and responsibilities of all the parties that are involved in that JV for TOD.
So in terms of major federal requirements, this should come as no surprise to anyone here if you've ever applied for a grant or sought financing from the department. These are all of the requirements that you must meet. Sarah just spoke to the STIP and TIP. Obviously there's NEPA, Buy America, Davis-Bacon, as well as the URA and other modal requirements, right? So I encourage anyone, you know, if you're a transit project, if you're a highway project, if you're a port project, right? Like, reach out to the relevant mode, be engaged with them early. It can only help.
So TIFIA 49, this was an initiative we announced back in October. And basically it expanded the Bureau's authority to fund TIFIA transit projects and TOD projects under TIFIA up to 49% from that 33% that Carl mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to dive a little bit more into TOD. This slide captures the different elements of TOD. Basically anything on this slide we have the authority to fund, maybe minus the people and the pets in there. So we can fund surface transportation projects. That's been our bread and butter. Under TIFIA, there are two different paths to eligibility for either joint development projects or projects that qualify as public infrastructure. And then under RIF, we can, as I mentioned, we can fund economic development type projects. So I wanted to show this one slide, and I'm happy to have follow-up conversations to get a little bit more in the weeds, but this slide, we can fund any surface transportation projects that's eligible for an FHWA grant or for an FTA grant. So these are the different types of stations and facilities that we can fund, and these also act as the eligible facilities for TOD development. So we can do fixed skyway transit, think light rail, metro, we can do ferries, bus rapid transit, intercity, and we can do intercity bus. For a local bus station, unfortunately, is not an eligible facility for the most part. It would have to be bus rapid transit, so at least half of the miles would have to be in dedicated right away. We can do intercity bus facilities, so think like a Greyhound, and then intercity passenger rail, so like an Amtrak or a Brightline or something like that. So those are all eligible facilities. With respect to the TIFIA eligible facilities, that's like a bus rapid transit would be TIFIA eligible facility, a light rail or a metro. And we could fund what qualifies as public infrastructure. Public infrastructure, we can do horizontal public infrastructure, so think parks or foundations or utilities. And we can also do vertical public infrastructure, so think publicly owned buildings like a library or a civic center. And all of this development would have to be within walking distance or within half a mile of that eligible facility. I will say that in terms of, we get a lot of developers asking us about housing. We are still navigating the spectrum of what is eligible versus what is not. So I'd say if it was purely public housing, I'd see a very good case in path to eligibility. Strictly market rate residential, I don't see that being eligible. So, but we have a lot of mixed use developments coming to us, and we're working on navigating those as the projects come. Joint development is another path to eligibility under TIFIA. We're a little more flexible in terms of the type of station, but it would need to be, there would be need to be a much closer relationship between the development and the service itself. So it either needs to be physically integrated, or we have developers coming to us that are leasing land from a transit agency and building on that land. And there would need to be an agreement place that spoke to that. And then finally, RIF, eligible TOD, the development would need to be around an intercity passenger rail facility or like an Amtrak facility. So for RIF, we can fund commercial and residential, but it would have to be around, as I mentioned, an intercity passenger rail. So if it were just a light rail station, that would not be RIF eligible, unfortunately. And there's different criteria for each of them. Again, I'm happy, in the interest of time, I'm happy to have follow-up conversations about that, but that's an overview of our TOD program right now. So just our process for the TIFIA, these are for the TIFIA and RIF loans. We follow a 4-phase process. We have, to begin on the left, we'll have an initial consult with a potential sponsor. They'll come to us with a specific project in mind. We'll explain the program, say how it could fit with their project and what their paths forward could be. So we'll help them define their project and work with them to submit a draft letter of interest, or LOI. We have a template that we share. The development of that LOI is an iterative process, so we'll get people feedback and we'll pull in our underwriters when necessary and work with that sponsor until they're able to submit a final LOI. They would also be required to submit a financial model, and for TIFIA loans, they would need to provide an indicative rating. On our end, we would do an eligibility analysis as well, and once you're determined to be eligible, you would be invited to move to the creditworthiness review phase, and that's when you would start to work much more with our underwriters and get into the negotiating terms and conditions, and you'd work with them until you closed on the loan. And then basically you would enter the portfolio management phase until you paid off that loan.
One little caveat that's important: prior to the loan closing, construction contracts must be executed. So you don't necessarily have to begin construction, but those construction contracts for whatever it is you're doing have to be executed. Real quick, Cecilia and I will be splitting these. I'm going to speak specifically to the Build America Center and the Regional Infrastructure Accelerators. Those are my sort of 2 programs that I'm managing right now. The Build America Center, this is our 2nd iteration of it. Right now, it is a consortium of research universities, primarily their transportation institutes. It's led by the University of Maryland, College Park. Partner universities are Stanford, Purdue, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech. The Regional Infrastructure Accelerators program, as you know, PNWR, it's one of our first round cohort RIAs. To date, we've made 10 awards for $10 million, so not a lot of money, but I would say a lot of impact based on the organizations we're working with. We've actually already published the NOFO for $24 million. It did close. We are in the process of making awards as I speak, and I'll get into some more detail on the RIAs and some of the work that they're doing. Next few slides. Sorry. So yeah, really quickly, and I'll pass it. All right. So again, we've made $10 million in awards to date to 10 different RIAs. You know, what is the purpose of the program? And I really hate to read from slides, but I think it's important to read that paragraph. You know, established to assist entities in developing improved infrastructure priorities and financing strategies for the accelerated development of projects. So, you know, we want to take projects from conception to implementation. And that can include planning, you know, studies and analyses, revenue forecasting, engineering and design, statutory and regulatory compliance. Pretty much the only thing that the program does not allow for is construction and real property acquisition. So all of those other things that can help you move a project from conception to implementation. And this map just gives you a general idea of where our existing RIAs are located. So our first cohort consisted of the San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG, in San Diego, the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, PNWR, in Seattle, the Fresno Council of Governments, Fresno COG, in Fresno, the Chicago Metropolitan Area Agency for Planning, CMAP, as well as the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency, NOACA. Say that 12 times in a row, see what happens. No. The second cohort that we awarded earlier this year, Central Ohio Transit Authority in Columbus, Dona Ana County, New Mexico, the Panhandle Regional Planning Commission in Texas, the Resilient SR 37 program. This is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in San Francisco, as well as Suffolk County in New York. And just really high level, some of these projects are hard TOD projects, like the Midway Crossing project in Suffolk County. In Cleveland, NOACA is working with both the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the city of Cleveland on various infrastructure projects. Central Ohio, COTA, their transit authority, they're doing more digital infrastructure. The Panhandle Regional Planning Commission, they represent those 41 Panhandle counties in northern Texas, very rural. They're doing a lot of work on roadway improvements and things to that effect. Both the Fresno COG and the Dona Ana County, New Mexico, they're working on very similar projects, inland kind of trade ports to assist with all of the logistical stuff we've heard about going on the last few years. SR 37 and Sandag, they're doing essentially the same thing a different way. Sandag has done some engineering and design work on the Lausanne rail corridor, essentially 5 rail lines that need to be relocated due to coastal corrosion, and the same issue with State Route 37. They need to, you know, sort of rebuild part of SR 37 to locate it more inland. And, you know, last but not least, Penwar, representing the multi-state jurisdiction, our only multi-state entity, and you know, we all know the amazing work that they do. So this map represents all of our existing RIAs as well as the existing Build America Center entities. And we can talk more about this in the office hours if anyone has questions.
All right, so I want to provide a little bit of an overview regarding a new initiative referred to as the Thriving Communities. Thriving Communities is a program that has 4 established cohorts: the networked communities, complete neighborhoods, main streets. So within the complete neighborhoods, that cohort is actually broken out into 2 individual cohorts. One is more complete streets focused on urban, suburban communities within MPO areas, and then the other cohort is complete transit focused. So for Thriving Communities, this program was funded in the FY22 and 23 Appropriations Act, and is really designed to make sure that disadvantaged, small, rural, tribal communities have the tools necessary to really kind of help shorten that gap required to get them closer to funding transportation projects. The initiative also includes some additional resources, the DOT Navigator, which I'll go into a little bit more in detail after this segment, and is really designed to provide the direct technical assistance support. So when communities submit an application, they're not awarded funding directly from DOT. We're actually matching them with a technical assistance provider who will then come in and you know, allocate resources to them based on what their gaps are within their community. So for FY22, 25 million will be awarded for FY22 and 23. We have just really getting going with the FY22 program. Cooperative agreements have been signed with each of our 4 capacity builders. We've kicked off the outreach segments with each of the 64 communities across the U.S. And then we're getting ready. One thing I wanted to mention that's not covered in the slide, we are getting ready to kick off the FY 2023 Notice of Funding of Opportunity. That will be coming out sometime by the end of August, 1st of September. So here's just kind of a description of each of the community of practice groups, right, and kind of what that looks like. The Main Streets cohort are those communities located within the tribal, rural, small town communities, really focused on economic development, transportation, and a variety of community issues. The second cohort is Complete Neighborhoods, which is focused on urban and suburban communities located within an MPO planning area. And then the complete transit-oriented neighborhoods, similar urban, suburban communities located within metropolitan regions, but more focused on advancing equitable transit-oriented development. And then the fourth cohort there is networked communities, and those are the communities located near ports of entries, airports, freight, and rail facilities to address housing, environmental justice, economic, mobility, and access issues. So here's a map for the FY22 program. 64 communities were selected. 20 communities fell within the Main Street cohort, 14 communities within the networked communities, and then I believe 30 within the complete neighborhoods. What this does not include, you can't really see, there were 3 communities selected within Alaska, and then this application cycle also included Puerto Rico as well as the Mariana Islands. So I wanted to just kind of give a brief snapshot of the communities that were selected within the Penn-Wire region for the FY22 program. So let's start with the Main Street cohort. Rexburg, which you know is located in eastern Idaho, was selected, our only Idaho community that was selected for this program. They've asked that the program come in and really help address various components of the city's master transportation plan. Specifically really looking at ongoing economic development as well as housing concerns within the city. The next community is the City of Independence, Oregon. Significant, I believe, 80% or more of the residents are classified as migrant agriculture workers communities, and oftentimes fall within the lower income category. The city has developed a Central Talmadge project that will address development of business, housing, and transportation infrastructure to better connect the southern half of the city to schools, services, and jobs. The third Main Street community is the Shoalwater Bay Indian Tribe on the west coast of Washington, south of Seattle. Is a very narrow area of land that's kind of sandwiched between the ocean and a hillside. The physical size of the reservation has really dwindled in size, and due to climate change and a variety of other factors, there's quite a sense of urgency to relocate the tribe uphill, I guess you can say, and so they are really seeking programmatic support, on what are the variety of resources and things that they need to consider as they reposition their community. For the complete neighborhood, we have Pierce County Public Transportation. They're looking to really create a unified vision. They've got several projects that they're looking at within that area, but they're really needing help to create a unified vision with their various stakeholders and overall implementation plan for the transit-oriented development. Within networked communities, we have 3 communities here, the Nisqually Indian Tribe in Washington, and then 2 communities within Alaska. The Nisqually Indian Tribe are really looking at various options to advance mobility across the tribe. The city and borough of Wrangell, Alaska, are really looking at a variety of technical assistance modes to really help create a more diversified economy with a more stable tax base. And then the city of St. Paul, Alaska, has been really in the midst of an economic crisis caused by a severe decline in the Bering, you can see here, sea crab stocks. The community really wants to use the support from this program to implement a feasibility study. That's just kind of a little bit of an overview on the Thriving Communities program. Now I'll go into just some helpful grant management application tools that might be helpful for agencies. I've enclosed the QR code here as well as the link that directly will take you to the DOT discretionary grants dashboard. There's a lot of information in here, more than 90 plus grant programs, which include actually others, federal agencies as well, not just DOT grants. And there's a variety of search filters that you can use in there based around the topic, funding source as well. And this is just another helpful information slide regarding just the various grant application resources that are available regarding a variety of US DOT discretionary grant programs, funding and financing options as well. So for the DOT Navigator, and I believe the DOT Navigator is somewhat linked with the discretionary grant dashboard, but this is really, let me just say, there's a lot of information on the DOT Navigator, right? You can find an overview of many of all of our DOT grant programs, technical assistance programs. There's helpful checklists, workforce development information in there that you'll find really helpful. And there's kind of the three different areas you see on the right side of the screen, right, that can help kind of taper down the results of what you're looking for within the DOT Navigator. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is so the Build America Bureau has 2 new grant programs that will be coming out within the next few months. The first one that I wanted to highlight on is the Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program. There will be $10 million over a 5-year period. 3.4 million available within the first 2 fiscal years. The maximum award is $320,000 from FY22 and $360,000 from FY 2023. Without reading through every single task on here, you kind of get an idea for the types of tasks that funding would be eligible for under this grant for technical, financial, and legal. There is some very specific eligibility requirements around this grant program. Local governments, political subdivisions outside of an urbanized area with a population of, I guess, less than 150,000. You know, Department of Hawaiian Homelands are eligible, as well as federally recognized Indian tribes. One thing I did want to mention is that the Build America Bureau program team will be hosting a webinar tomorrow on rural eligibility for this grant. And so if your community, your agency is interested in this program, or I would encourage you to just check out our website. The webinar information is on there. If you're not able to attend the webinar, you can register for it, and then you'll have access to the recording after the webinar. One thing I did want to reiterate after talking with the Build America Bureau program lead is that the application cycle will open on August 14th. And so as part of that criteria, there was a requirement to actually post the letter of interest. So if you go to the Build America Bureau website, you can see a sample LOI. And they are encouraging that if you're interested in applying for this program, to go ahead and fill out the fields in the LOI and then save that information to a Word document, because it's going to be a highly competitive program, and it's a first come, first serve. And so that way, when the application cycle comes, then you'll be ready to submit your application. And the application cycle will remain open for 45 days until September 27th. Just a brief overview, not a lot of information on the Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant Program. We know there will be $100 million over a 5-year period. $4 million is the limit to grantees within a single state. There will be 2 types of grant availability options: technical assistance grants as well as expert service grants. Applicants are encouraged to pick one of those 2, the technical assistance or the expert service grants. We anticipate that NOFO will be coming out soon, sometime hopefully in the fall, and no anticipated date on that yet.
Great job, guys. So you guys can hear me, right? My name is Dr. Santiago Cruz Rueda. Call me Santi. I'm with the Federal Railroad Administration. I want to thank everyone for coming that did not go to the tour. Really appreciate that. I was tempted to go to the tour too, so. I think my slides are next. All right, perfect. So we're going to do a tour of FRA. How about that? Does anyone, is anyone familiar with the programs from FRA? Raise your hands if you are. So it's about half the room, half not. So I'm going to go kind of high level onto the programs that are available. Full disclosure, the Corridor ID program is not on the slides here because we are currently evaluating the applications for the Corridor ID program. The national map showing the corridors that are selected into the program will come out this fall, so I cannot talk about the applications or the program right now, but we'll have more info once the awards are done later this fall. Okay? I also have a colleague here from FRA, Katie, and any questions related to the long distance study, please go to Katie. She's your expert. So we'll do that after in the office hours. So we'll get right into the presentation here. The calendar, this is a calendar that's available on our website. This shows the NOFO publications and the selection process. So the next program that is coming out is Chrissy. And then soon after will be the Fed State National NEC, along with the Corridor ID. That'll be late fall. And then the Fed State National along with the Interstate Rail Compacts. The following year, these are the ones that are on the calendar. As you can tell, the Corridor ID program is not on there because it's the first year. It's a flagship program. So we have to get it into the cycle, and then we'll try to get that in the calendar. We're going to try to do similar dates for every single program starting next year. That way there's some familiarity, you know, okay. For example, February, March, we know the NEC is going to be coming out every year. So we'd like to get a cadence on the same months moving forward, but we've had a lot of new programs, a lot of money coming in, okay? But to get the most up-to-date information, it's all online. So the grant life cycle and approximate time frame. So once you are selected into an award, similar to many other projects across the DOT modes, you go through the pre-obligation process. So let's say you get selected, you get money provided to you. You would be doing the pre-obligation process, which takes about 6 to 15 months, where you do your scope, schedule, budget, performance measures, terms and conditions, et cetera. The Corridor ID program will be a little different. In the Corridor ID program, something else, in August, which will be next month, mid-next month, we will actually be having a webinar that will provide more context about the Corridor ID program. That's going to be posted live. That'll be coming out mid-August, so keep an eye out for that. And that'll provide a little bit more context and the expectations as once you get into the program, right? So we're running through the webinar with the front office and everyone else to make sure that we're consistent on the message we're providing. So after the pre-obligation, you go into the post-obligation phase. So that means when you get the funds, you're going to be doing the grant administration with us for 2 to 5 years, routine monitoring, similar to any other program, right? Your monthly meetings, your quarterly, et cetera. And at the very end, you do your closeout, which includes your financial reconciliation. So the first program we're going to talk about is the RCE, the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. This has had a wonderful buzz across the country. The program purpose, it funds highway rail, pathway rail, grade crossing improvement projects that improve safety and mobility for people and goods. So there's a NOFO that just came out, and this was one of the programs that we actually did provide awards recently. As you can tell, the majority of the funding, which is the blue portion there, the thick blue is no more than 20% funding is reserved for projects in rural and tribal lands, and no grant awards shall be smaller than $1 million. So we're going to get to the good slide here of eligible applicants and then the map, the national map showing where they're at. So eligible applicants, states, including DC, Puerto Rico, US territories, political subdivisions, MPOs, et cetera. And this is all stated in the NOFO. So here are the selected projects. Bless you. So In Idaho, we do have one project, and that's up north, and that was for $36 million for railroad crossing elimination. So they're just getting underway. So as you saw on the previous slide, right, they just got awarded. They're now in the pre-obligation phase to move into the next stage of the project. So it was approximately $571 million across 32 states, and 63 projects were selected into the first inaugural year of the RCE program. That's great news, and more to come. Yeah. And then selected project types. So these are the type of the projects that are selected. Grade separation projects comprise majority of the selections. So as you can tell, the total funded projects, 63 total. The majority were grade separations, then safety, mobility improvement projects, track relocation, grade closure. All this information is on the FRA website as well, but it's great information to provide here to the public. CRISI program, the other great program that we all know about FRA. This is probably the one that can be used for pretty much almost anything in the railroad industry. So the purpose of this program is to improve safety, efficiency, reliability of intercity passenger and freight rail systems. The NOFO came out 2022 in September, and the awards will be coming out shortly. The eligibility, this is what I talked about. This is the most wide-ranging program, right? So railroad safety technology, track, station, equipment improvements for intercity passenger rail, even grade crossing improvements as well in the CRISI program. There's been a lot of new things done by the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that's on the right side of the slide. So the measures that prevents trespassing, preparations for emergency plans, and rehabbing or procuring locomotives provided that such activities results in a significant reduce of emissions. We actually had a couple grants that got awarded with those new additions from the bill. The next part of the tour is the federal-state partnership for intercity passenger rail. Who's heard about this program before? It's a unique program. I don't think it's as widely used as some of the other ones, but this program improves American passenger rail assets to expand or establish new intercity passenger rail service, including privately operated intercity passenger rail service. So the NOFO will be coming out, as stated below. And some of the changes, so the bipartisan infrastructure law changed language in all these programs. This was probably one of the major changes compared to some of the other programs, along with the new addition of the Court ID program. So the new eligibilities, it's now expanded to federally recognized Indian tribes. It allows projects to expand or establish new intercity passenger rail service. And it allows projects on privately owned railroads lines used by intercity passenger rail. So this can be used for a lot more than before, right? Provides more eligibilities, modified selection preferences, and supplemental advance appropriations as well. Interstate Rail Compacts is another program within FRA. This one improves, promotes, and develops intercity passenger rail service, including activities related to the financial of such service. I am not super familiar with this program compared to some of the other ones. I have not acted as a project manager for this program, so this one I'm kind of reading off the slides, fortunately. Eligibility project criteria, cost of administration, eligible expenses must be related to intercity passenger rail service to be operated by Amtrak. So that's the eligibility for this program. Next up in the tour is the restoration and enhancement projects or programs. So the restoration and enhancement program, it provides operating assistance for grants for initiating, restoring, or enhancing intercity passenger rail transportation across the country. The NOFO came out July, August, and there's $106.4 million available under this program. Establishes new services, additional frequencies, service extensions offering new onboard services. So examples of eligible expenses, train engineer staffing, fuel, train dispatching, station management, and overhead. This program has been used by several states, or will be used by several states across the country. So some recent changes here. New priority to applications for routes selected under the corridor identification program. And this will be discussed more in the webinar in August, but there's a link. So grants may provide assistance up to 6 years, but may not exceed 90% of the projected net operating cost, 80% for service, and so on and so forth, as stated here in the slide. Now, this is the interesting part of the presentation, best practices. What we've seen has worked and not worked when some of the projects are being implemented across the country. So one of the best practices that we did is project readiness. FRA recently released a project lifecycle guidance. Has anyone read it? Good job. I know, I have it on my nightstand. Yeah, I read it every night. Come on. Jeez. I identify project lifecycle stage. So what this does, it basically provides the project lifecycle. And on here, in the bottom part of the slide, you'll see where the programs lie within the project lifecycle. So the ones that we talked about, the regional rail plans, interstate rail compact, that's more of the system planning early on in the stages, right? The corridor ID program, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, even though it is in the planning to the project development. So it goes from your SDP, Service Development Plan, all the way to NEPA and PE for the corridors across the country. And then CRISI and the railroad crossing elimination, that goes all the way from the planning to construction. So they're eligible for all the phases in a typical project life cycle. Does that make sense? And then the restoration enhancement program, that's more of an operations, which is wonderful because I've always liked programs that provide assistance for the operations, not just building it. We got to maintain and operate it as we go through the program. So that's what that program's for. So non-federal match, another best practice is federal share total cost shall not exceed 80%. So 20% minimum of non-federal match for projects may consist of public sector. And as some of the other loans that was talked about early on can be used as the share, right? Applicants must identify the sources of their matching in the application and other sources and must clearly and distinctly reflect these funds as part of the total project cost. We've gotten many applications where they talk about this is what the match is, but it's not clear as to where it's coming from, right? So having clarity up front on your financial strategy early on really goes a long way, not just in the application, but to the success of the project as a whole, okay? And in-kind contributions, including donation of services, materials, et cetera. Another best practice is funding breakdown. Clearly show the project match breakdown, as stated, and verify these amounts in SF424 match. The project location, the reason this is really important, we're actually creating a new GIS maps within FRA. That'll be also later this fall. Now that we're getting more staff on board, we're able to do more things. And so we're going to be providing the locations of where many of these programs and projects are at. That way we can see where some overlap is for best practices. So please provide your longitude and latitude. The way I had to create the last GIS map, I had to go on Google Maps and literally right-click and find the lat and long for many of these locations. So please do that. It helps us out tremendously. Grade crossing projects should include the crossing number as well. Is everyone aware that when accidents occur or there are things in grade crossing, you have to notify FRA? And there's a, yeah, I see some shaking heads, yeah. So that is really important. And actually in the application process, when you submit that, we verify the information that you're providing is accurate, right? Webinars, this is another big thing that many applicants are not aware of. Webinars are crucial. We have them on our website. We'll have the Corridor ID webinar coming out in August. And a lot of the things that I'm repeating now, you could have easily seen on the webinars as well. So the webinars are wonderful information, but they do provide a bit more context as to folks that have been part of the program and folks that are even been with FRA for a while, right? Because there's been a lot of changes from the bipartisan infrastructure law. A lot of good changes, and that we all need to be made aware of. With that, this is our contact. It's been a pleasure taking this tour with you. I appreciate it. And I'll hand over to our host here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia, Sarah, Carl, Santi. We will now open it up for questions. I believe they're going to be through the app to start, or from the audience to start, maybe.
Late this fall. I literally just had a meeting about the schedule. I walked out and was talking to my counterparts, and we have a meeting with our front office to just talk about the schedule. So we've always said late fall, September, October, November. It's going to be around them, but we just need to verify some information, because this is the first time we're doing this program, so there's a lot of steps that we're now understanding that need to be done, not only within FRA, but OST, et cetera, the senior review team. So this fall, yeah. We're trying to hit AASHTO if possible in San Diego, but we don't know if we can make that. But we'll provide that information in the webinar, actually, next week, yep.
Next, I'll go ahead and repeat it in case everyone can't hear.
Yes, so did everyone hear the question? Okay, so he was asking about pre-obligation and what FRA's thought process is on doing that. I know some of our other modes, like FTA, has some set rules in place. The nice thing about FRA, we're able to be flexible in many cases. So for sure, the pre-obligation cannot be done until you're awarded, right? Once you're awarded, at that point you can have the conversation. As far as where FRA stance is on that, that's been discussions that we've had with project managers internally to make it a standard consistency across the board. So for everyone's awareness, FRA has had a new realignment, as many of you heard, and we're doubling in size, so we have a lot of new staff coming in. We want to ensure that we're providing the same message across the board. So yes, it's discussions we've had internally. We actually have a discussion in a month or so internally about it again to ensure that we're on the same page, not only for Chrissy, but for all the programs across the board, right? Because we want to create consistency. But we want to be as flexible as possible to ensure that we provide the project sponsors the ability to move forward in a timely manner. We don't want to be the hurdle behind it, right? But the key is making sure that the award is done officially, and then that conversation can occur. Because we've already been talking with other folks as well across the country that have already been talking about pre-obligation before even they get an award. I'm like, hold up. So we're going to talk about that and hopefully standardize it across the board, because it's not only Christie, it's all the other programs we talked about, right? But the key is, once you have an award, then you could potentially do it. I don't want to talk about the legality and things. That's RCC is discussing that internally, but there's some language that we've been looking at to see if we can provide standardization and flexibility for folks regarding that. I can't talk more about that because I'm not in the mix for that, but that's now with the project managers. One of the big issues with that is also right-of-way acquisition, because I've run into that as a project manager, where folks request funding for right-of-way acquisitions because they want to acquire it as soon as possible, right? Or environmental, et cetera. And we've had discussions, we've made calls in the past, but then when we talked amongst all the project managers across the board in the nation, we've noticed some inconsistencies. So we want to make sure we try to standardize that if possible. Yep.
We have a question from the app. Are any of the grant programs administered by the USDOT suited to cross-border infrastructure projects, especially roads or rail?
I mean, the short answer is yes. It would be hard to, I guess, point to any without knowing specifically about the project. So maybe we can talk more about the project and how it aligns with some of the programs. Okay, but yes. I'll try to answer that two ways, and everyone else can feel free to jump in. In terms of our credit finance program, specifically TIFIA, that deals with surface transportation, you have to be a public, or you can be a private entity so long as, you know, the project is a eligible surface transportation project. So that one's pretty straightforward. For our technical assistance program, specifically the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program, It's essentially the opposite, right? You cannot be a private entity and be eligible for that program. You would have to be a public entity. Um, I'm not being facetious here, I'm just being honest, right? I think, I've talked a lot about statutory changes to TIFIA that hasn't happened, right? And seeing that the IIJA and BIL were just issued, I've not heard anything about changes to this point. But again, for our credit finance programs, the eligibility piece is really reliant on the modes. So again, if it is a rail project, we are looking specifically at what FRA's rules are. If it is a airport project, we're looking specifically at what FAA's rules are. So our pathways to eligibility for our credit finance programs are really defined by the modes. I hope that answers the question.
And then just expanding, I know I mentioned this earlier, for TIFIA and RIF eligibles. For TIFIA, you can see the list of eligible borrowers here, can include traditional borrowers, but you can be a private borrower as well, but you're required to have public sponsorship under TIFIA. So that the public sponsor does not need to be on the loan itself, but they need to be involved in making sure it's programmed into a STIP and or TIP. And then for RIF, which is more railroad focused, traditional borrowers are railroads, government entities, government sponsored authorities, private entities can be an eligible borrower, but they need to be in a JV with one of the other eligible borrowers that are listed there. So, and that can include railroads and other public entities. So for that, there just needs to be an agreement in place that speaks to the mutual benefits and contributions for all of the parties involved. So we're definitely encouraging under both of them to have public-private sponsorships. We're evaluating doing value for money analysis for P3s within our loan programs right now. That's ongoing, but for the loan program specifically.
Can I add just one thing?
Go ahead.
One sort of contextualization of this, because I think it's important. A lot of potential sponsors have come to us, just traditionally, also through some of our TA programs, and they want to pursue EV infrastructure projects, right? And for a long time, there is no precedent for EV infrastructure and how we finance EV infrastructure projects. And I know I've talked with Bets and Bruce about this a lot. Recently, just a few months ago, the Federal Highway Administration published an OFO all about EV infrastructure. So that will, in essence, once those awards are made, that will set a precedent for how we then are able to finance EV infrastructure projects. And hopefully, FAA will do the same things with terminal improvements, right? Hopefully, FTA or some combination of modes will do the same thing as it relates to TOD. So I'm using those examples as sort of newer things, EV infrastructure, right? TOD, terminal improvements at airports. 3 challenges that we haven't necessarily found a way out of. But particularly for EV infrastructure, having a mode sort of set the precedent for how they do it will give us a path forward for how we'll do it. So if you're interested in EV infrastructure in particular, I think now's a really opportune time because of all the work that FHWA is doing, and then, again, the precedent that will set for our financing programs.
And I'd like to give the FRA perspective. So FRA, the railroad corridors are a bit unique because they cross different states, right? So we need a governance agreement from the states, but we also have some private entities that are interested in our program. So they've submitted applications, but they've submitted it through state DOTs. So they're concurrently with state DOTs, right? The state DOT is the lead applicant, but there has to be a governance structure with the lead applicant and the private entity. But everyone understands that the private entity is the one building the infrastructure, right? So the way the agreement has been done is the state DOT is the one that applies, and then that adds the other contextual twist is it goes through different states, right, in the corridor. So then you have to have one lead applicant, one state DOT taking the lead, and then a governance structure between both state DOTs and a private entity as well. That's been the way it's been applied. I can't talk more about it because we've been reviewing applications, but Right now, a couple private entities have applied, and they've been done that way with an FRA. Okay.
Thank you to our panelists. A hand for these very esteemed guests. We'll take a short break, let them get to the tables, and then office hours will be open. So grab a cup of coffee or drink of water and let them get situated. Thanks.